Here is how I would describe my guest today: passionate and highly skilled. Trisha Thapar is a speech-language pathologist and owner of Adventures in Communication, a pediatric private practice based in Long Beach, California. Trisha works with clients all over California through teletherapy, and she is passionate about working with children who stutter. Today you will hear how she not only works with kids to improve fluency, she educates parents and teachers, empowers the child, and helps to instill a positive self-concept. I invite you to listen in.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hi, Trisha. Welcome to the Diverse Thinking, Different Learning podcast.
Hi, Karen. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited too. And we're recording on Friday at noon. How are you feeling? I'm exhausted, but excited about this conversation.
Excited about the conversation. Excited about the weekend. Wrapping up the workday. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. And again, I'm really thrilled to have you here because, on episode 20, we talked about speech and language difficulties with Carol Karp. And we have spoken, you and I have spoken, and I really wanted to kind of jump into a discussion about stuttering because, oftentimes we're referring kids who have problems with receptive language or expressive language or higher level language, but there are also other speech and language difficulties that kids experience. And I would love for you to talk about that. And you are a pediatric speech and language pathologist. Right. You work with younger children who stutter, who have fluency issues, and those with apraxia of speech. And for some people, there might be, I don't know what those are. I don't know how they're different. So I would love for you to take us to school and tell us a little bit about, stuttering, how it's different than fluency, and is it the same as apraxia of speech, or, what are we talking about? So
absolutely. So oh my gosh, there's so much within the field of speech-language pathology, right? We cover such a wide range of disorder areas. It's such a great field in that sense because you can really specialize, but you can also do a little bit of everything. And personally, I've always been more drawn to speech sound and speech production versus language, which also is, such a different area. Yeah, there's, so speech is more about what we sound like, right? The way our sounds come together to create language. And language itself is more about meaning. So, vocabulary, grammar, all of that stuff comes more, falls under the area of language. And then within speech itself, within the speech sounds and speech production, we have so many a variety of disorder areas, and my personal area of passion is working with children who stutter. So you said fluency. So within the field, we call stuttering, we call it actually a fluency disorder. There are a couple of different types of fluency disorders. There's stuttering, there's cluttering. I don't really do a lot of work with cluttering, and it's a little bit more rare. And so I focus more on stuttering. And so you will often see, especially on children's, students of school age kiddos, their IEPs, you will often see stuttering referred to as a fluency disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And then typically when we're speaking, we do have, most of us have different types of disfluencies every once in a while, which is disfluency is basically just an interruption in the forward flow of speech. So like what I just had right now, and pausing. all of that stuff, right? So we kind of, all of us have experienced that to some extent. And that's when we have typical disfluencies and then atypical disfluencies. And that's, the more atypical disfluencies are what we call stuttering. There's so much within stuttering itself too. So we've got different types of stuttering, different causes behind the stuttering. I can really go on and on.
Yeah, I know. And it's probably like a range. And like you're saying, like there are different types of stuttering. And I'm thinking of parents who might see their little kiddos stuttering. Yeah. And sometimes I'll have parents say, well, he only does it when he's really excited. And maybe it's just excitement. I'd love for you to tell us, when is it kind of something you shouldn't be concerned about? When is it age appropriate? And when is it related to something that's not maybe neurologically based?
Yes, absolutely.
That might be a big question, but those are questions I know that parents have because I've had them ask me about it and I send them to you.
Exactly. And, that's the kind of questions that parents ask their pediatricians and everything. And so that I can definitely go into that. So, one of the questions that you had was, what is something that is a red flag? That is something that maybe we should get assessed or looked at. So, typically when a lot of young children, as they're developing their speech and language, so much within them is developing, right? Especially in those like 0 to 5 years, right? Everything is developing. So we do notice as kiddos have like different, language growth spurts, we do see stuttering happening. And that's a lot of children go through it. I would say a majority of the children actually do experience a level of stuttering as they have growth spurts in their language. When it becomes an area of concern is when the stuttering has gone on for an extended period of time, when that would be like longer than say 3 to 6 months, when they feel the stuttering, when even young children often will complain of things like, my words are getting stuck, I can't speak right, it hurts to talk, things like that. When you notice physical tension in their face, and a huge, probably the biggest thing that, sort of sets aside the typical disfluencies from, what is stuttering would be family history of stuttering. So if you have family history of stuttering, even if maybe the frequency of the stutter or the severity of the stutter doesn't seem to be something that stands out, if the child is stuttering, if parents have brought that concern up and there is a family history of stuttering, right away we go ahead and either do the speech language evaluation or recommend intervention. Yes, because there is definitely a genetic component as far as stuttering is concerned. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. And so with that family history, it sounds like you're more likely to intervene because of the family history and the genetic neurological component associated with it.
That's correct. So what that means is the child, if the family, when I say family history, I mean, if the child has a close relative who has continued to stutter into adulthood. So that means the child is more likely to continue to stutter into adulthood, which means that they will need intervention. And the earlier we can get the intervention started, the better our prognosis is and the better they will be able to manage their stuttering.
Okay. And so, and I love that you said the early intervention, because I think you and I are both on the same wavelength in terms of the importance of early intervention. I talk about this a lot on the podcast because oftentimes there is this wait and see approach, or maybe it'll go away. And sometimes parents don't know, well, how long should I wait? Because you say it has to go on for an extended period of time. Is that a week? Is it a month? It's been like half of the school year and it's still there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that? Or is it maybe it differs from depending on the history of the child?
It does differ a little bit. It's so interesting. I think stuttering, there are a lot of areas within speech and within development in general where we get a lot of that wait and see approach. But I feel like stuttering this wait and see thing is very prominent with stuttering. You get that. I actually, back in graduate school, I assisted with a research study that got me into wanting to work with children who stutter. And this study was an international study that was actually about, that wait and see approach, and how it kind of shed light on how often children and, families of young children get told to wait and see, get told by educated professionals like teachers and pediatricians, people they trust, that the child is probably going to grow out of it. Let's wait and see. Let's figure out what happens. And that really should ideally be the speech and language pathologist's call, not a pediatrician's call, a teacher's call. So I, across the board, recommend that if you do have a concern, if you do have a family who comes in with this concern of stuttering, refer them to a speech and language pathologist. They will be able to make that call, whether or not, and whether or not the child needs intervention. And at the end of the day, the evaluation is only going to help, right? So if there is any gray area, if there is, a family that has even a little bit of a concern, go ahead and get them evaluated. A good speech and language pathologist who is experienced in the area of fluency disorders and stuttering will be able to guide them to the correct path, to the path that will help them. Yeah.
Okay. And, I'm thinking about parents who may choose to wait or have been told to wait. And sometimes it's the inconsistency with the stuttering, that sometimes they see it, sometimes they don't. Like, what are your thoughts about that? Because some parents will say, well, he only stutters when he's excited or when he's nervous. Do you see that? Is that a valid, rationale for delaying it? I would love to hear more about that.
That's very interesting. So typically, even if the child is somebody who we would qualify as somebody who does have a fluency disorder, is a person who stutters, you'll always see an increase in their stuttering, in the frequency of their stuttering, the severity, whatever you call it, when they are trying to regulate emotions, big feelings, or trying to regulate physical discomfort. That's something we see across the board with any disorder areas, right? So if a child has sensory processing issues, they will have a difficult time, working through their sensory processing, regulating themselves if they are emotionally dysregulated, if they are physically uncomfortable or whatever. So similarly with stuttering, if a child is tired, or, sometimes I get this often from my families that, when they're really excited and trying to tell a story, they tend to stutter more. When they are like right before bed, maybe, or for some kiddos, like right when they wake up, because they're not completely like fully awake yet and be able to regulate their bodies, they tend to stutter more. So I tend to say, if a family comes to me and says, well, they only stutter when they're excited or when they're telling a story or when they're nervous, I tend to say, well, let's take a closer look at why that is. And maybe it's something, maybe we are only noticing it at those points because it's more prominent at that time. But there may be other instances throughout the day that maybe we're not really seeing very much, So I would say we need to take a closer look. Let's do an evaluation. Let's talk. Let's have the child kind of speak for an extended period of time. Like, I like to say, we during our evaluation, we have them kind of go through a few different kinds of speaking tasks to get an idea what their speech sounds like. So I think I also hear that a lot, where the child stutter more, but I think mostly it's because that's the time where it's so prominent that it's really standing out to the family.
Okay. And that's absolutely true, that you do see it in other areas and not just speech. When there's emotional dysregulation or a strong emotional component, that can impact thinking. I think about kids who, struggle with reading or struggle with focusing, and then they're really anxious. It's harder to even focus on the work that they're doing because of that emotional state that they're in. So I can really see that. And it seems that, when you're talking about stuttering, it's something that people observe. And so unlike maybe a reading difficulty, people don't know you have a reading struggle unless you read out loud. Or people may not even pick up on the fact that you're not paying attention unless they ask you something and then you're just like, what? Because you weren't paying attention. But stuttering is something that other people observe.
Yeah.
And it seems like because of that, it would impact children in a number of different ways. Particularly, I'm thinking about their self-concept. Do you see that?
Absolutely. So that's actually really what my, my practice is all about, is working on in general, I think that stuttering therapy should be more than just improving fluency. It should really be about developing that positive self-concept, and working on getting a child to not only accept their speech, but feel good about it, feel confident, feel comfortable speaking in a variety of situations. You're absolutely right that stuttering is, because it can be observed. There's such an emotional component to it. So a huge portion of the evaluation that I do, and a lot of my colleagues do, is, besides just doing the SSI, which is a stuttering severity instrument, so like we're looking at, frequency and stuff, like more data-driven type stuff, I always like to include an assessment looking at their attitudes and reactions to their own speech. There's actually a couple of different, depending on age groups, a couple of different, even standardized evaluations that are about the communication attitude. So how does a child think about his own speech? How much does he know about, how much do they know about their own stuttering and what stuttering is? How do they limit their own lives and their own, their experiences, their interactions with others because of their feelings and perceptions about stuttering, and, how they view their own speech.
And I think that's a really important point about limiting their lives, because I can imagine, and I've witnessed, seeing kids in the classroom who decide not to put up their hand because of fear of stuttering, or don't engage in conversations with peers because of fears of stuttering. So it can impact so many aspects of their lives, and, limiting themselves, like you said, is kind of one of those things that you see as well, that you may not see in other difficulties that children experience.
Yeah. I mean, with stuttering, especially with, now that we've been doing school virtually and so much of our social interaction virtually, it's so easy for children and really adults who stutter too, just, people across the board, to resort to using text or resort to just not taking the opportunity to verbally communicate. I have seen an increase in people being referred to me because of that, because just all the changes that we've had to cope with over the last over a year,
Right.
Yeah, people are starting to, it's just so prominent, deciding not to take that opportunity to speak and communicate. So I see that a lot across the board with a lot of my clients. Yeah.
Right. And, you talked a little bit about your approach in terms of integrating the self-concept piece into the work you do. So if parents are bringing their kids to you and the kids are stuttering, can you talk a little bit about what that work would look like with a child?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always, depending on where the child is, I like to work on a few different things. Of course, we're obviously working on improving their fluency. That is an important piece. And that means, teaching them different strategies and things like that. But a huge component with the strategies too is I work on the child and the parents, the family, understanding that the child gets to choose when they want to use their strategies. So this is not something that they need to use all the time. They have these tools in their toolbox and they can use them. Like, let's say they want to do a classroom presentation and they don't feel like stuttering. They can use it at that time. Let's say they just kind of want to overall enhance how smoothly their words are coming out, during a specific conversation. They can use it, but they are allowed to, and they should have that freedom of deciding not to use their strategies and deciding to feel comfortable stuttering when they're at home, when they're in their own space, or whenever they want to. So giving the child the agency is a huge piece that we work on, and getting the family to be comfortable with, getting the family and the child to be comfortable with the idea of stuttering. So I actually work on, using, we repeat this mantra: stuttering is not a big deal. And so with my clients, especially via teletherapy, I'll have, let's say whoever parent or sibling or babysitter is in the background, I'd be like, "Oh, who's that in the background?" And then, the child introduces me to whoever it is, and I'll say, "Oh, do you want to tell them that thing that we were talking about?" And then, the child will say, stutter, "Oh, Mom, stuttering is not a big deal." And just the idea of saying that and then saying it to somebody else is reassuring and reaffirming for them. And then, once we're working on all of that, with the strategies, getting comfortable with the idea of acceptance. And then beyond that, we also work on stuttering education. So the child working on educating their family and their community really about what stuttering is. So we do things like classroom presentation. I've been doing like virtual presentation, helping them prepare a presentation and talking to their classmates about stuttering and what stuttering is. And we really present it in like kind of it's cool. It's this fun fact about me sort of light, and which is how it should be presented. So they'll do things like, talk about the celebrities or President Biden who stutters, and how stuttering doesn't need to be something that holds you back. But in that presentation, they can also talk about what their experience with stuttering is like. So they really get to design it. And then we also I love to do work across with, kind of overlapping with psychology a little bit, where we work on doing some cognitive behavior therapy and positive self-talk. So, what kinds of really getting into like, what kinds of thoughts do you have about your own speech? What are the ways that you may be judging yourself, and how can we talk back to that thought? So helping clients understand where their fears and feelings regarding their speech may be coming from. So we do a lot of work with that. At the same time, always working on also improving fluency. And then stress reduction or tension reduction is a huge part too. So I work on not only just fluency shaping strategies, but also kind of understanding how our speech machine works. How do we talk, and where do we feel our stuttering in our mouth? And kind of working on reducing that tension. We do a lot of mindfulness, breathing exercises, understanding what tense means, understanding what relax means, and how to get from tense to relax. So it's really very comprehensive. It's like working on everything.
I was just thinking that. I was thinking that this is such a comprehensive approach to stuttering. And is that kind of the standard, or are you going above and beyond? Because it seems like that you are doing more than most people do. But maybe this is the standard of care for speech and language pathologists. But I love the fact that you are, you're making kids aware of stuttering in their bodies, but you're empowering them at the same time. So, and having that opportunity to be able to share about their stuttering with other people and educate other people on what it is, why they have it, and what they're working on, like I said, is so empowering for the child. And then you're also, again, I love the fact that you said that they can choose when to use the strategies, that the expectation is not that you use it all the time, use the strategies all the time.
Yes. I mean, the expectation should never be fluency. The expectation should be wanting to communicate and choosing to communicate. So that's a huge, really cornerstone of my practice. I do feel that that should be the standard of care. I think that it's starting to be, but I know that fluency, stuttering in general has been an area within the field that we don't often receive enough education in. When it comes to, in grad school, we had a short summer course. I had the best fluency professor, who's, a mentor to me to this day, and is really a reason behind all of these, my passion in the field. But I know that a lot of programs don't have the same level of education. And even within our program, we had a sort of an abbreviated course, not as intense as some of our other courses. And I personally know a lot of colleagues who don't feel comfortable treating stuttering. So I think that comprehensive level of care should be the standard. And I think we're getting there, but, there's a lot of work to be done.
And it might be too that, people, because psychologists, I know I'm in the position oftentimes because I do evaluations to refer them to speech and language pathologists, but then also educators might not be aware of the scope of the work that you do. They may be thinking, I'm noticing stuttering in the classroom, I'm going to send them to someone, and may just tell the teacher that they're going to give them strategies to improve fluency. But it's so much more than that in terms of the work that you do. And I think that would be very uncomforting to me as a parent, knowing that you are going to address this in such a thoughtful and comprehensive way, particularly paying attention to the social emotional piece, because I think that is very, very important. When you said they limit themselves, and, I've seen it. I mean, we've all been in classrooms where we've seen kids who've stuttered. We have, family members. I have family members in my own family who stutter, and that they change the words that they say it differently. And if thinking about a kid in the classroom who's doing that every day, there is a social and emotional toll that it takes.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like you help them through that, to process that. In addition to, again, the strategies for improving fluency, you're also helping them from the emotional place as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's, like I said, that's such a cornerstone in the work that I want to be doing. Absolutely. And within the classroom, I mean, I think that it would be so wonderful if we could get more education in the field. I think our school speech-language pathologists, they have to do everything, right? They have to be a generalist because they are working with a variety of disorders. They don't really have the choice to specialize because they have to see, and they're expected to be good at all of across the board disorder areas, which is why I think specialists within the field are such a good idea to supplement that work that the school speech-language pathologists may be doing. Not to say that there aren't incredible school speech-language pathologists who are fantastic at their job. I could never do what they do on a daily basis. But I do think, like you said, the need for specialists comes from that just the comprehensive need. The child needs more than just the fluency strategies. They need that above and beyond, and that's true for all disorder areas. And I think that's why the field of speech-language pathology is really starting to have more specialists, and we are starting to really dive into specific areas that I feel like I'm meant to do this work. So.
Yeah, well, I can tell just by speaking with you, because I think it really helps when the person who's providing the services and interacting with your child has a passion for what it is that they do, and are coming to the work from a place of empathy, and also just this passion for wanting to help kids in a number of ways. Yes. And, we talked a little bit earlier about early intervention, and, I'm not as familiar with the speech and language literature, but what does it show with respect to early intervention for kids who are stuttering versus those who don't get into therapy later? Are there differences in outcomes?
Yeah, there can be. So the statistic is that children who stutter between the ages of, I think it's 3 to 5, is usually when you see that stuttering coming, kind of becoming more prominent, just because there is usually a growth spurt in vocabulary and just sentence structure. They're talking more, they're putting longer sentences together. So that's where we start to see that stuttering. And I believe the research is that, 70% or so of kids who do stutter between those ages, the majority, they do grow out of it. But there is that 30% that they do not grow out of it. And unfortunately, within that 30%, there are a lot of kiddos who do not receive the intervention right away, because the expectation is that since the majority do grow out of it, like any other early intervention, area, they don't receive that intervention. And because of that, they often don't understand how to manage their stuttering until a much later age, which increases frustration and increased behaviors, can lead to other concomitant areas of need too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So I know this is a question that a lot of parents have when they're taking their children to you. I know a question is going to be, after working with you, will they stop stuttering, or will they always stutter into adulthood?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Yes. I get that all the time.
Yes, I'm sure you do.
Yeah. So I'm very transparent right off the bat, because I'm trying to work on removing the stigma from stuttering, right? But I do I do understand where the parents are coming from. So I always say that stuttering is a lifelong disorder. I cannot tell you for sure if your child is going to continue to stutter into adulthood or not. These are the risk factors, that I usually give them a handout, and that, risk factors include gender. Typically, boys are more likely to stutter into adulthood than girls are. Family history. If this child is younger than the age of 6, that usually, increases their likelihood of growing out of stuttering. So if a 7-year-old comes in, chances are they're likely to continue stuttering into adulthood. All of that is not to say that we can't manage it. I mean, at the end of the day, we are going to be working on giving them tools to manage their stuttering. So whether or not I give them tools to manage their stuttering for the next 2 years or for the rest of their lives, I am still going to be working on kind of the same thing. I try to tell them that what we are working on is helping our children to learn to want to communicate and be excited to talk, and building that positive self-concept and communicative confidence. That's a term I use all the time. And that's what we're working on. So whether it's for 2 years, 6 months, or for the next however many years, the work we're doing is not really different.
Right. And the work you're doing is limited, but the tools that you're giving them are lifelong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Even if they do grow out of stuttering the next 6 months, they're going to remember how it felt to, overcome this thing, to talk across, to go from not wanting to talk across, a variety of situations, speaking situations. They're going to know what it felt like to say things like, "Oh, stuttering is not a big deal." And right, you're absolutely right that those tools go beyond just speech. They go into really that communicative confidence and viewing your speech and your whole self more positively.
Yes, absolutely. And, I'm talking to you and I can just hear, and I've said this already, but I can hear the passion in your voice for the work that you do. What made you want to do this work? I'm always interested in how people end up doing the work that they do, because it feels like you were meant to do this work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I absolutely feel that way. There are so many reasons. It's always, I get that question so many times, and every time I sort of ask myself that, I find a different facet of why I wanted to go into this.
Right. There's probably multiple reasons, right?
Yes,
not just
right?
one. Yeah.
Not just one. So growing up, I had my childhood best friend is a person who stutters. She has stuttered into adulthood, and I saw up close all the challenges that she faced and overcame, and what stuttering meant for her as just in her life and as an individual. But outside of that, when I entered the field of speech, I wasn't thinking, "Oh, I'm going to specialize in stuttering because, of my friend." But like I said, my professor was just incredible. So my first week of grad school, I want to say like maybe my first day, I think, I had her, she was teaching Lauren McGill. She was teaching a class, and she started talking about this incredible international research study, and talking about how, there's such a need for a lack of education, even within our field, and then out in the allied professionals outside of our field too. Like I was talking about with pediatricians not knowing when a child should be referred to a speech-language pathologist, and just kind of telling families that maybe, wait and see, and with educators not knowing and, misinforming the families unintentionally, right? But I was fascinated that this is not something that's unique to America. This is something that's happening across the world. And my friend that I grew up with, this was in India, which is where I grew up. So I saw her struggles with stuttering too, and it's just so universal. And I decided to assist with that research study as like a first-year grad student, and I learned so much, and I was hooked. And then for my capstone project, I helped design a camp where children who stuttered could meet other kids who stuttered. So it wasn't really focused on therapy. It wasn't like, we're going to go to this camp and we're going to be cured. It was it was about kids meeting other kids who stutter. And the fantastic thing was we were able to get a lot of camp counselors who stuttered. So they were able to see not just other kids who stutter, but successful adults who stutter. And it was, it's an annual thing. We didn't do it last year, but we did it for 2018 and 2019. It's called Camp SAY, S-A-Y. And we work with Stuttering Association for the Young, S-A-Y. And yeah, just that was just grad school for me. And then when I entered the field, I was working with across, and I still continue to work across a variety of disorder areas like early intervention, just language delay and apraxia, like you were talking about, and articulation and all of that. But there was just always such a passion within me for working with children who stuttered that, I just kept continuing to, what you put out into the universe, what you want, right? And the universe sort of gives back. And I had one client, and then, that client referred another client, and it just sort of grew from there. And now I have my own private practice where the majority of my caseload is children who stutter.
Children who stutter. Oh my goodness. And that camp, I'm going to make sure I put a link to that Camp SAY, in the show notes, because it sounds like that would be really impactful for so many kids who realize that they're not alone. They're not the only ones who struggle with this. And again, to see adults who are doing well and who have this history of stuttering.
And, besides that camp, there's so many, it's stuttering therapy really does have a lot of that component of building a community. And I think once we empower children as they become adults or teenagers, they want to help because they sort of saw this perspective shift within themselves, right? So I see a lot of clients and, clients of other colleagues I know within the field who end up wanting to either become speech-language pathologists or mentor other kids who are stuttering. NSA, which is National Stuttering Association, is a great organization too to check out. They do a ton of even virtual conferences and meetups for teens, children, parents of kids who stutter, and they're just so great. And they have chapters across the country. And they, before the pandemic, they would do things like putting on picnics and, events like that too. So, and there's friends who stutter. There's really a lot once you start to really get into wanting to build a community around stuttering and meet others.
So in that community seems like it would be very important and helpful for so many for not only the child, but for the families as well. And I love that you also integrate family work into the work that you do. So it's not just, helping that child with fluency and with, educating that child about their speech difficulties, but you're also educating the family about what to expect, how to support their child, and, acceptance.
Yes. And knowing that they're not alone in the community and that there are other people going through similar challenges, which is why these community events are just so fantastic.
Wonderful. Well, this has been such a great conversation, and you've really helped me better understand stuttering and the therapeutic approach, which I think it sounds like the gold standard for intervention for kids who stutter. And if listeners have questions or want to get more information about the work that you do, have questions about stuttering, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Absolutely. So that would be my practice website, which is www.adventuresincommunication.com. There's a contact page where you can, put in your information, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. There's also my phone number and email listed on the website.
Wonderful. And I will put all of that information in the show notes when this episode airs. Trisha, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was very informative and very enlightening. And thank you so much for the work that you do, because it really changes lives. So thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. I'm so excited to educate the community more about stuttering.
I am so thankful to Trisha Thapar for coming on the podcast. If you would like to know more about her, make sure you check out the show notes. There are also additional resources about speech and language difficulties, and there's an excellent blog that Trisha wrote about how to talk openly with your child about stuttering. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.